Pleasure tonight to welcome members of the Baldasera family. As you all know, a well-known family in our village. Mr. Aris Baldasera and his wife would like to start the evening off by telling you about the Baldasera story and how they came to be in Wheatley Hill and how the family developed. Then after Aris, we would like to continue the evening with Mr. Martin Baldasera from Shatford, Dr. Martin Baldasera, who will tell you where the family are at this present day and bring us right up to date. So, as I am, I'm looking forward to, like sitting back and enjoying the Baldasera story. So let's give him a round of applause just to get him.
Yes, all right then. Thank you very much. My dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, and as I say, dear friends, that is only a small way to express how really those friends are in Wheatley Hill. Coming back to here to see all the people here tonight, the familiar faces, it's really, it's a godsend to me. However, I've been asked to come along here tonight together with my brother Joe, my sister Mary, and Martin, Dr. Martin from Shatford. I've been asked to come along here tonight and tell a story about the Baldasera family. Now, it's a very colourful story. It's all about one man who fought the battle of life. Now, to put this story into the right context, we must start right from the beginning, right from his early days. But before we do that, I would like to find out a few things, and just how we can put over what Angelo Baldasera, our father, was, what sort of a man he actually was. Now then, my dear friends, what sort of a man was he? I'm sure there's a few here tonight which was not familiar with my father in the early days, and they've heard a lot about him. They would like to know a little more about him. What sort of a chap was he? Well, that's a very good question. He was self-made. There was no strawberries and cream and hands up to the ladder for Angelo Baldasera. He was a constitution in himself. He didn't need anyone to tell him what to do. He was kind. He was gentle. He had the wisdom of Solomon. He had the patience of the saints. Far and wide, in his contemporaries, he was well known right throughout the areas of Trimden, Shotton, and various places with proximity of Thornley and Wheatley Hill. But everywhere I went, and I'm sure where Joe and Mary went, they would hear the same thing. Same thing. That he had the aptitudes, he had the hallmark, although he was Italian, he had the aptitudes, the hallmark of an English gentleman. He was kind to the extreme. Absolutely kind. Sometimes it amazed you how kind he really was. Well, it had no bounds. I'm sure our family can never record to the extent of his kindness how far it really did stretch, because even in the old days when I was at Wheatley Hill, I always met up with some of his contemporaries at odd times, and they would round about my father's age, and they would turn around and tell me, I'll tell you this one about your dad. And of course that we gleaned a little bit of information how far his kindness really stretched. But we'll never know that. As a matter of fact, he was so kind, he donated to 2 football teams who were playing against each other. and when my father went down that, he didn't know which one to shout for. Nevertheless, anyway, now then, sometimes these little ditties and little news snippets come up to me about his kindness. But I would like to relate 2 in particular, which I've just picked out of the many which I really do know. And I was walking from Wheatley Hill to Thornley. I was going to church one morning. And I was getting near to the officials' club there, and Dr. Gray's surgery, just on the opposite side of the road. And I saw this little old lady, and she was walking towards me, and she was very old, round about, well, I would say well over her 90s. So anyway, she drew closer and closer, and I could see she didn't want me to pass. So I stood in front of her, and she peered up to me with these myopic, she had thick glasses, myopic eyes. She looked into her face, and she said to me, in a Geordie language, well past, she said, "Are ye a Baldasera?" I says, "Oh yes, I'm Aris from Wheatley Hill." "Aye." She says, "I thought you were." She says, "You walk just like your father." So anyway, as I started to get interested then, and so she says, "Do you know what he did?" I said, "Oh no, I don't know what he did." "I'll tell you what he did. He's a good man." He says, "I was 16, Joe was 18. We had to get married. Do you know what he did? He paid for the whole wedding. The whole wedding, everything on the table." And she says, "He took us to church with his horse and trap." Well, when I heard that, I walked to church. I felt another 2 inches taller. To think I had a father like that was stretched to that length, paying for a wedding and taking to church. However, that other one was I was in Wheatley's shop, and I was behind the counter, and I was washing glasses. It was Saturday morning. My father was standing at the door, had a long apron, propped around to his chest, tied with a brass hook at the back, and about 3 inches from the ground, this long apron, typical of the times. And it was Sunday morning, and there wasn't a person in the street, nobody at all. Well, we heard this can being kicked, like a sort of, one of these beer cans, kicked along the street. My father was looking along the street. He had a small child come into view. He had no ears under his bare feet, and he was kicking this tin. My father was absolutely flabbergasted to kick the tin. And he accosted him, says, "What are you doing, kicking the tin with your bare feet?" "Where's your shoes? Where's your shoes?" he said. "Got none," he says. "Got none." says, got no shoes. He took the child by the hand, walked to the other side of the road, and there was an Oswald's shoe shop there then. Put a pair of shoes on this man's feet. He came out, brought him across the road. He says, now you see, you go home. And the first thing he did, he went back to the tent. He started kicking the tent back along the front street. Well, my friends, I'm sure when we think of my dad, his extreme kindness, all these little things we think about him, his tenderness, and his thoughtfulness. He had a wet eye for the underprivileged. He was a great man, And I don't know if you've ever seen that picture of what do you call that picture again? With Thomas More's A Man for All Seasons. Did you ever see it? Thomas More and the King Henry VIII. Now, it's typical of my father, or I should say, with my family here tonight, our father, our dad. It's typical of him that just what he was, a man for all seasons. He was a man for all seasons. And now that I've given you some idea of what sort of a man he is, or he was, I will get started with a little story of getting back to his early days when he was a small child in Italy. Well, about 50 kilometers south of Rome, there's an area there which is called the Frosinone area. My father used to call it Provincia Frosinone when he used to speak of it. Now this area, it was industrialized to a certain extent, but it was ringed around by grapevine growing areas, pepperoni, tomatoes, and maize, cornflour, you know, this hard maize. And the majority of the people were engaged in the agricultural side. Now, it's very mountainous. Now, it's set among the mountains in a rather strategic part there, because it was a stronghold, Sora, which was a stronghold in medieval times. Now, this place, Sora, is a place about 3 times as big as Wheatley Hill. A lot of shops. The last time I was there, it had been a lot had been done to it, as opposed to the time of my father. Now then, dotted around the outside of Sora is some villages, about 500 or 1,000 people. Isola dell'Iri, Roccaseca, Carnello, and 2 or 3 others, which the people that were in the agricultural side, they lived there, and popping into Sora to get the goods and all that sort of thing during the course of the week. Now, my father lived in a house completely detached from these places, these hamlets or small villages. And his father had a very large tract of land. He was a landowner, and he was pretty well off. He didn't do so bad. He wasn't doing so bad, because he had tracts of land set off to different individuals who made the living out of it, and they did a living out of work. He was doing all right as well. But it is sometimes very much like the manorial system in the old days, going back to the medieval times, the manorial system of the serfs. That's the way they worked it, you know. Now then, my father was he was only tiny, he's only young, at that particular time, and his father, my grandfather, he was considered by his surrounding friends as being well off, pretty well off. And for a very short period, my father went to school, but not for very long, because during that particular time there was a little controversy over the title of the land. And there's a court case, and what really did happen was my grandfather lost the land, and strangely enough, it went over to the Vatican. It was the Vatican that was contesting about the title of the land. Now that he lost the land, and of course this had a very bad effect on him, because he was no better off than the ordinary worker. He was brought down from a landowner down to a worker, and it took it very badly, and he died very early. It's very shortly after that he died. Now, in the meantime, my grandmother, that's my father's mother, my grandmother, and my father, now I don't know whether they had any brothers and sisters, I've got no connection as far as that's concerned, but had to leave this house. It's a big house, had to leave the house, and go live in with some relations. Now, the relations they lived in didn't take too kindly to them. I think there was a little bit of jealousy there, because they were previously well off and had come right down to the bottom. So what happened was, they gave her every menial job that was going, washing up, doing all the cooking, anything that was hard work, slavery work, and she had to do that for the keep, so that she was allowed to live there with my father, Angelo. Things got so bad with her, and she was intimidated so much with this extra work, she died. And I don't know, I tried to make inquiries, but it wasn't under very good circumstances. Now, my father was left then an orphan. But what did he do? He went to live with his grandfather. His grandfather. But he was very old. And of course, he lived there for quite some time. And they were very close. He was well loved by his grandfather. But he died. So then he was getting up then to about 17, 18-year-old. And what happened then, he went to Frosinone and worked on the railways. And he was there quite a long time. Then he came back into the grape growing areas, spent a bit of time there. Then he went back to Frosinone again and worked on transport, horse transport. By then he was getting up to about 19, 18 and 19. And then, at that particular time, there was an embargo in Italy and an embargo in England. The employment situation wasn't very good on either side. So there was no one who was allowed to leave the country on either side. And my father was determined to get out of the country and come to England. See? So what happened there was, the embargo was lifted. My father seized his chance. There was an uncle in Hartlepool. He had an uncle there. But see, the conditions in those days were rather to the extreme, because the only way in which you could come into England was by a sponsorship from his uncle. And by that sponsorship with his uncle, it meant that he was under complete dominance by his uncle. His uncle could threaten to send him back to Italy if he didn't do what he was told. And that meant, in most cases, with some of them, they worked night and day, did a lot of work. And they dare not contravene his master in any way, otherwise he was threatened to send him back. Of course, the majority of them didn't have the money for the fare either, you see. So anyway, my father put up with it. He landed in Hartlepool and he was under complete dominance of his uncle. And he was going around the streets of Hartlepool with a hand barrow. He was selling ice cream, but the conditions were there was a hard case. He had to turn over exactly half of what he made to his master, and which meant that his master was better off than what he was, because really, my father he found he was just getting nowhere at all. So what did he do? The first thing, after he'd put 2 or 3 years up with that situation, he made an application for nationalisation, and it was accepted, and he became a British subject, which meant that he was completely immune from his boss. He could walk out, he was a British subject, he could do anything, he'd even get a job of other kind, other than selling ice cream in Hartlepool. He could go and do the factory, he could do anything, because he was a British subject. Now, there's not many of the Italians did that, but my father did. And from then onwards, he was an Englishman. So, well, under those conditions now, the new conditions, the sky was the limit. He was a very enterprising man, my father. He was ambitious, very ambitious. So he opened a shop out in, what do you call that street? Can you remember, Mary? There was a street in Hartlepool anyway. He opened his shop out. Musgrave Street, that was it. In Musgrave Street, Hartlepool. He opened a shop out there. Now then, there was another family there in Hartlepool who'd been there quite a number of years previous to my dad. And they were established, pretty well established, making his own biscuits and everything. And he had a daughter, Arminia Maria, and she was a beautiful woman. I've heard my father mention about her many times. As a matter of fact, when he's been working in the boiling of ice cream, and I've been within hearing distance, he's mentioned her name very many times he mentioned her name. Now then, they got married. Now she was a well-educated woman. She'd been educated in the convent at Hartlepool. And she'd gone through the whole number of years of education, up to the age of 14, I think it was at that time. But nevertheless, anyway, she was well equipped. She was well equipped, and that was a great asset to me dad. So they opened this shop out in Musgrave Street. Now then, things were very bad in Hartlepool. Oh, they were, as my father often told me, he says the things were bad then. They were pawning the beds. So bad. Now then, my father still went round the streets of Hartlepool with his ice cream. Now at that time also, in Thorley and Wheatley Hill, the miners were doing very well. It was under private enterprise, and they were working night gangs, and they were contracting with the management for certain jobs at the coalface and all that sort of thing. And some of them really did get well paid, and there was money in this area. So my father got his sights on Thornley and Wheatley Hill. Started to think a little bit. So, as you will remember now, he was Bonafide. He could go do anything he wanted. He was just like an Englishman. Just go anywhere, do anything you wanted to do. So he had his hand barrow, and he used to put a 10 gallons of ice. Mind, there's a lot of weight in a 10-gallon tub of ice cream with the ice and salt added. There's the big tub, ice and salt, and the ice cream in the centre. 10 gallons in. It was tremendous weight. For a start, he used to push that barrow to the station. And he used to board the train there, and he used to get off at the station at Wheatley Hill. It's called Thornley Station, whereas to Wheatley Hill. He had to push it from that station up to where the royalty was. The royalty cinema. And there, well, delicacies of that kind were very rare around in this area, because there's nothing to buy at all, very much. Just a few sweets in the shops and one or two of the delicacies, you know. So the sight of ice cream coming into the area was a real godsend, and it used to sell out completely in a very short number of hours, 2 or 3 hours. It was all gone. So then he used to get the tub, empty out all the ice and salt to make it light in weight. And there was no ice cream inside the can. And the whole affair, his barrow, was very much lighter. As a matter of fact, you could just run along with it very easily. And he used to push it back. Didn't get on the train, he used to push it back to Hartlepool. And so, now then, there were very big beer drinkers in Thornley and Wheatley Hill at that time. You know all about that. So, as Angelo sold out of his ice cream, and the pubs were turning out in the afternoon, some of them were carried out. And more often than not, there was an odd one from Wingate. You see? Absolutely flat out, couldn't even walk, carried out. So they would say to Angelo, "Angelo, you're going back to Hartlepool, yes?" He says, "Will you drop him off at Wingate?" So you used to sling him over the barrow. They sling him over the barrow. And then my father, of course, it was much lighter. But my father, being the man he was, he wouldn't turn on, "Oh no, I can't be bothered." "Yes," he said, "throw him over, throw him over." He would even say, "Have we got another one?" So he pushed him off and dropped him off at Wingate, you see. Now this thing went on for quite some time, this barrow pushing thing. And so he suddenly decided, well, I'll get myself a horse and cart instead. He got himself a horse and cart. And that made things a lot easier. and he could put 2 barrels of ice cream on. It was on the cart, whatever. It made it was a different thing altogether. So anyway, this night, it sold out again. It did very well. And he set off from Thornley to go back to Hartlepool. Of course, it was getting dusk. And my father knew he had a lot of money on him. And the chances were that someone could be hiding in the bushes or east side of the road, you know, jump out, tackle me dad, and relieve him of his money. So he thought of this. So he carried a pick, an ice pick, a long ice pick with 2 pointed ends. You know that, Mary, can you remember it? The ice pick. Yes. He carried this ice pick at the side and down to the bottom of his cart, you see. So he gets just to the top of where it sets off, gets up to the top, just turning left to the, well, straight up here, straight up the top. And that used to call the Cemetery Road, and turning left to go along the main Durham Road to Wingate, you see. So he gets up there, and it was starting to get a little bit dusk, getting dark, you know. And he was getting along quite well with his horse and cart, you know. He was doing all right, quite getting his speed up. Someone come out of the bushes and ran along with the cart and put his hand on the door, you see, 2 hands. Now, as if to jump in, tackle me dad, you see. Well, my father saw that, and it was dusk and dark, he didn't know what it was, and he gets this pick up and he hits both hands, one each, and the man fell into the road. It was quite an iron bar, you know, with 2 points in his head, very heavy, you see. So when he came back the next day to sell his ice cream, he's a man from Wingate, because he passed through Wingate. Sometimes he stopped at Wingate, you know, to sell a bit of ice cream on his way to Thornley, you see. And he's one of his best friends came out of a house with 2 hands down front. So anyway, after that, he plied his horse and cart for quite a couple of 2 or 3 years, and then eventually he set his eyes on a shop in Thornley or Wheatley Hill. So the first shop he got was it was more or less like a hut, and it was in front of the picture house. We used to call the Royley, didn't we? Yes. We used to call it the Royley. It was not a it was a makeshift affair. It wasn't what he wanted really in the first place, but he packed it full of stuff. He came with his horse and cart in the morning, ice cream, confectionery and everything else, opened up, and then he spent the day there. So anyway, this went on for some time. He was looking after the shop at Wheatley Hill, and Maria, or Mary's mother, she looked after the one in Musgrave Street, you see. So, but things were bad, very bad in Hartlepool, terrible. So, my father wanted Erminia to go to Thornley. He'd buy a house in Thornley and open a shop in Thornley. Thornley was the better of the two, as far as work was concerned. There's more money made in Thornley was at that particular time. So anyway, but she wouldn't budge. She wasn't very keen in going out there. So this night, he'd spent all day, I don't know if it was a Saturday night, Sunday night, or wherever it was, but he'd had a good day. Now then, He went home, the horse and cart as usual, and as a rejoinder there, places were never broken into in those days, like they are this day. He left a shop there completely closed up, went back to Hartlepool. But anyway, he landed back in Hartlepool with his horse and cart. He went into the house, and he went up to Maria, and he said to her, "How much have you taken today?" She brought the money out, 6 and 6. So he had his white apron on. He had all the takings and everything, what he took in Wheatley Hill. And he tipped it all onto the table. And there was gold sovereigns, there was everything. The amount of money there, well, it was fantastic. And everybody looked at it, and he says to Amelia, "Will you come now?" She says, "Yes." So then of course, they got a house in Gold Street. And my father opened the shop in Hartlepool Street, but it wasn't as big then. It didn't have the house next to it. He bought the house later on next to it. And then Peter, I'm not so sure whether Peter and Danny was born, Sab was born in Hartlepool. I'm not sure about that. Our Mary could tell you better than that.
Yes, they were born.
Where?
They were born in Hartlepool.
Above the shop.
Yeah,
Above the shop.
in Hartlepool.
Where's that shop now?
Yeah,
It was next to the schools.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, where's that shop?
yeah, yeah,
It's still there.
Yeah.
It's still there.
yeah. But anyway,
When I was born there, that's where I was born.
yeah.
Until we moved.
Well, our Peter would be somewhere around about 7, Danny 5, South 3, and you'll become to 1 or 2
Yes.
at the time. But my father opened the shop out in Hartlepool Street. He had Gold Street as a house, you see. But later on, he bought the other house next to the shop, and then he increased his factory at the back and gave up Gold Street, you see. But I don't think your mother,
She died
your
in
mum,
Street.
saw Hartlepool Street, did she?
She died in God Street, Aris.
She died in Gold Street, that's right. I thought it was. Now then, our Mary, my sister, she was you were 2 years old when your mum died.
Yes. Yes.
You were 2 years old. Yes. And my father then, of course, this great alliance, this good woman, this lovely woman that was my father's first wife, or Mary's mother, Peter's mother, Danny's mother, Sab's mother. Lovely woman she was. She died of pneumonia. That was right, wasn't it, man?
Yes, true.
And then my father was in a dilemma then. He had 4 children and they didn't know what to do. He had business. By then, it brought 1 or 2 aliens over. And the Durazios and the Pirottis, it brought all those over. And they opened shops, you see, under my father's supervision. He sponsored them. And he set them away. But the shops are still under his name, you see. Now then, he had quite a job. He got a family and a business to look after, you see. So he suddenly decided the only way out was to get married again, go back to Italy, and which he did. He did. He went back to Italy. Now, in that particular area where he was, he knew everybody. And there was a family called the Evangelistas, and they had 4 daughters. And my mother, well, the second Mrs. Baldasera, my mother, I was the first one of the second Mrs. Baldasera. Now then, my mother was the eldest of the 4 daughters. Now my father, of course, when he went over there, it's a different arrangement then as far as marriage is concerned. The marriages were all arranged, you know, and there were all the sort of dowries and things, and all that went on, you see. So my father went back to Italy to marry again. And he's looking for a good wife. And so Biagio Evangelista, the father of he would be my grandfather, you see, wouldn't he? He would be my grandfather, Biagio Evangelista. Now then, he was really overjoyed with the fact that he was going to get one of his daughters placed with Angelo Baldasera and go back to England. He was very, very, very happy about that, you see. And my dad, I think he must have had a little affection somewhere at that particular time, or previously, and he knew my mother to a certain extent, you see. So anyway, I don't know whether he got married in Italy or whether he got married in England, but I should imagine he got married in Italy. We would do that, wouldn't he? So anyway, he got married. And then my mother and my father, then, they came back into England. Now, my mother couldn't speak a word of English. The date would be just before the war broke out. We bought 1913 when he came across. Now, I was married. I was born in 1915, and then what happened then? In 1916, my dad was called up for the forces, for the army, which left my mother with me, small child, and 2 remaining shops to look after. Well, of course, naturally, she'd get help from quite a great source of people around her. I've gleaned that information many times. And I'll find out, I'll meet up with different people. Oh, I work for your mother, you know, going back so and so many years. Oh, I worked for your mother when your dad wasn't there. And now, in the meantime, these, with my dad being naturalised and a British subject, he was called up. But the other lot were all aliens, and they were conscripted. They were interned. And the shops became redundant, closed up. But the rations from the shops, the other shops, but other than Thornley and Wheatley Hill, were transferred to Thornley and Wheatley Hill. And while my father was away in the army, my mother, along with her helpers, did a good job. That a nest egg ready for him when he came out of the army in 1918. And the nest egg that was there was very, very substantial. Very substantial, because there were the only shops that had anything to sell at all. Thornley and Wheatley Hill. However, as as time wore on, my father came home in 1918. He tried to pick up the loose ends and get himself re-established, you know, back to normality, and Albert was born then, and Freddie. Then what happened then, in the 1920s, very little. There's very little happened other than the fact that my father was trying to get himself established. But the 1926 miners' strike came up. 1926 miners' strike. And things were so bad that the money, that nest egg that my mother made at that particular time, we lost it. All went in the strike. You had to get rid of it, you had to spend it, nobody had any money. And the shops were doing nothing at all, and the expenses were going on, everything else. Well, they found himself so much in the red that he had a mortgage shop at Trinity Grange, which I remember very well. And then, as that was in the 20s. Now, as the 30s came up, 1930, I was 15. Our Mary was 18. Sab was about 21. Danny 23. Peter was 25. Now then, my father's main object at that time was trying to get his family sort of consolidated in business. Get another business here, there for that one, another business here, there for that one, another business here, there for that one. So he started with Peter. Now, our Peter was a very clever man. As a matter of fact, he was the cleverest in the family. He was ambidextrous, he could write with both hands. He could write a letter inside out and hold it through the mirror to read. He was that type. He had a memory stretching back over the years. Recall that, Mary? Yes. Now then, but he had a charm with him. He could weave a customer in an instant when he's behind the counter. But he did not like business. He didn't like it at all. Didn't like it. He opened a shop out in Wheatley Hill in Nixon's, just Nixon's old bakery, just opposite the Royalty. And he was sitting there for some time. But he would do rather strange things. He would come away and leave the keys in the door. The keys would be in the door all night. You know, that was Peter. So where did he land? He landed up with Tonks. He had a mania for driving a lorry. That was him. Mania driving a lorry. So, but this shop he had did well because everybody liked him. They loved him, absolutely. They loved our Peter. He was well liked. But rather a strange thing. Man, he didn't like the business. You could see it there and then that he wasn't adapted to that. He had good business acumen, but it wasn't his cue at all. He would stand at the door, someone would come up, a chap would come up with a motorbike. And while he was standing at the door, he would say to the lad with the motorbike, "Bah, it's a good bike that, I'll have a go at it." He'd throw his legs over, and he would say to Margaret Hogg's father, who was around here, around about at that time, you know, always helping out. He says, "Jack," he says, "just go behind the counter for a short time." He says, "I'm going around the 4 mile. So while Jack was in, someone would come in and say, "Pound of tomatoes." So Jack would weigh them up. He'd weigh the tomatoes up. And he'd give them, he says, "How much is it? How did that?" So, such was our Peter. Such was our Peter. Now, our Danny was different. He was a real businessman. He was economics right to his fingertips. He was a good man. Business was EQ. He landed up at Shotton. See? Now then, and he did well. People liked him at Shotton. They really thought the world of him. Sad, he opened a shop up in Dunano Road, Thornley. Now, he was typical of my father. He had the same tender approach. He was very much like my dad. He was thoughtful, very studious, and he was a businessman. Now, he opened the shop up at Dunelm Road. He had hard going at first, but he made the grade. I was sad. He was a good man. He made the grade. He did. He did good there. Now then, our Mary, she was a hard worker behind the counter. She used to stand there, oh dear me, no wonder her feet's bad. Yes, it's true, you don't know what she did. So nevertheless, anyway, she says, one little caption one day, she said, "Dad, I've never been out for a fortnight." My dad says, "Never mind, Mary. Think of those poor buggers in jail."
Remember that?
But nevertheless, as time went on, our Mary was 18, got up to about 19. I don't want to throw a ring of flowers around her neck or anything like that. But I will say this, she was beautiful. She was a beautiful woman, our Mary, at that time. Now she is, anyway. But anyway, she got the wanderlust.
I know it was Aris. Your dad said, when you're 21, you're not 21, but I always wanted to be hairdresser, wanted to do this,
Yes.
but I had to stand in the shop.
But she was ambitious. She was ambitious. I was only 15, but I took notice that we were very close.
Oh, yeah.
We were very close, me and our Mary, 15, 18, 19, you know. And so, at this particular time, she said, "I'm going to get a job. I'm going to go away. I'm going to go to a place." And the lads in the shop said, "Oh, you'll be back in a fortnight." "Yes, you can't stand it." But our Mary took it. She said, I'll show you. My dad was crestfallen, sad. Our Mary was dearest one to his heart in the whole family. He's been the only girl. She was special. She was special. I knew that. I could see it in my father's eyes many times. And when she mentioned that she was going away, he was sad. Very, very sad. I took notice of that as well. Now then, he was hoping that she wouldn't, but she did. And this day she went away. She took a nurse's job at Brentford in Middlesex, and she was unaware to what she was going to. She didn't know. But when she got there, it was a mental institution. And, well, myself, I was to write to you, I was alarmed. I was really alarmed myself. And it wasn't going down very well. And my father He was distracted. He didn't know what to do. I could see he was losing weight and all the rest of it. But the job was so unsuitable to our Mary, and she didn't want to come home to satisfy her critics. It's what she wanted, to confound them. She wanted to confound her critics, you see. So, what happened? She was there, I don't know if she was there at Brentford in Middlesex, but Mary D'Orazio, another member, a distant member of the family, she was working in London. And she got our Mary a job at Edgware Road in a cafe, Cura Cafe, which specialises in steak and chips. No, the management liked our Mary. They liked her. The customers liked her. Everybody liked her. And she landed well. She was all there, and she stopped there for quite a length of time. Enough to satisfy the critics, anyway. You know, to satisfy the critics. So anyway, the pangs of home came. She wanted to come home. And so, my father, he was elated at the idea. He was elated, absolutely. He was a changed man when she knew she was coming home. So anyway, we're all sitting in the kitchen this night, waiting about Mary coming. And we're all sitting. Fathers keep getting up, walking to the door, looking out the window, keep gets a glass of water, sitting down again. He couldn't contain himself at all. Anyway, I cannot tell you how many was in the room, but I know my dad, and I was in, and I think about 3 or 4 members of the family were in. And all at once, had a pitter-patter, heard this in the yard. The door opened, and she was standing there. And I don't know whether it was a black fur coat or a black astrakhan. And her hair was black, and she had this jewellery, earrings and everything else. She looked marvellous. I'll tell you what, you were in a picture at the time. Picture, absolutely. So, I'll tell you what, you were like a Philip Star. You know, anyway, I saw my father, and I saw his face, and I tell you what, there was tears in my eyes. They welled up when I saw it. And my father his face went grey. He didn't know what to do when he saw her. And you both ran to each other, put your arms around each other. And I've never seen such an expression of paternal and filial love in my life as I saw you two together that night. It was marvellous, absolutely. Aye. Was the fur coat?
Fur coat.
Imitation.
Well, then anyway, they got placed, that was the 1930s. Now then, as time wore on, and it got up to 1939, war broke out. Now then, it was a case of they were all leaving home. Peter, start with Peter first. He was doing work with the essential work with Toms, and he didn't go into the forces. Danny went into the forces. Saab went into the forces, but he had to come out after 6 weeks. He had this complaint which didn't tie up with military service. Myself, I was called up. And Albert was called up. Freddie was called up. Tommy was too young. He was just at school days now. So they all went off to their respective places in the army for the military service. Now that my father was left on his own, virtually left on his own, you see. I'll marry. What happened to you at that time? You were.
Well, he had nothing to sell
Eh?
in the shop. He had nothing to sell.
Nothing to say.
So he used to make a pailful of jelly. You know,
That's right. But see, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And you used to get these little, not corners, they were like in the shape of a pie, little pie. And
That's right.
The bands used to come in, there was nothing to sell, so used to sell it for a penny. Penny, jelly pies. You know, a little tub. Yes, yes. And that's all you sold, that's all
Yes.
you had.
But Sid was called the DLI.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
And he was prisoner of war
Uh-huh.
right throughout.
Yeah.
And that was your side of the thing. He was called a DLI, and he was at a place called. He was in Austria, and he was at a place called Linz.
Yes, yes.
Linz.
He was also a prisoner in Italy.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Now then, they all went away. Now that my father was left with two shops, and I was away, and Elsie took my job over
She did.
at Wheatley Hill. But as time wore on, and the way conscription was, Elsie had to go into munitions to satisfy the situation. If it wasn't that, she would just have been called up as well. So she worked in that place at Tuthill at Aspel, yes. And then, as the war years went by, and my father battled on. I don't know how on earth he did it, but he managed to, with the help of various casual labour here and there, he managed to win through, you see.
Yes, he did.
So then, when it came to 1945, in the meantime, I after 3 years in the forces, I sustained an injury. I lost the sight of the left eye, and I came out in 1943, which helped matters a little bit, you see. But I was destitute. I was half a man. One eye I was half a man, and I was very. I didn't know whether I'd be able to get back to my normal ways of life, but I did. I managed it. I scraped through. I did my best. I opened another business out later on. Now that with his 4 sons, you see. Now, with the express intention of relieving himself and retiring, going into retirement. But the fact is, my father going into retirement was an absolute fallacy, because he was never aware. He bought a bungalow next to the Catholic Church, presumably to live there with my mother. My mother was a good churchgoer, and of course, naturally, a bungalow next to the church was ideal. And my father living there, well, it was a good setup, really. But first thing my father did in the morning was to set off down to the 5 Hartlepool Street and get among the lads again. He wasn't retired, you know. So, anyway, he formed this partnership, and it went well, all right, not so bad. And I was at Wheatley's shop, an ice cream shop, and everything was just going on a level plane, you know. So what happened then was my mother decided to go to Italy. And she went with a friend of ours, another Baldasera, Joe Baldasera, he was a doctor, he was a boxer at the time, boxer.
Suddenly.
Yeah, sorry, Joe. But anyway, while my mother was in Italy, my father took ill. He died in hospital. And that was in 1950. Now then, I missed something out there. In the 1943, 1947, Joe went to Ushaw. Am I right, Joe?
Rosalina.
1947, Ushaw.
I came out of Ushaw 47, went out.
You came out?
47.
Went down 43, came out.
And Rosalina went to Walsingham.
Yes. About 45, 46.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
She was 16.
Yeah. So, you did 4 years there, didn't you?
Yeah. No, I went to university.
That's right. 4 years. And we come up to 1950. My father died. So it was in 1952. 1952. I went to Italy on a holiday. It was Giulio 40. And when I came back, my mother was ill. And that necessitated of leaving Thornley on the bungalow and living with Joe, the brother, the doctor, for our own good, you see, at that particular time, because she wasn't very well indeed. She wasn't very well at all. In 1973, my mother died. And then didn't know Fred died in 1963?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. That's when you were in the
She might have been the other one.
in the shop. You were as well here, yes.
Eh?
You were in the shop. You were in the shop when our Fred died.
Yeah, yeah,
It was before you moved over here, wasn't it?
yeah. Anyway, Fred died and Peter died in
Peter died. 6 years. About 37 years ago.
yeah,
37 years.
yeah. Yes, anyway, it was 1950 my father died. And of course, what happened there was we tried to carry on with the partnership. But once the figurehead's gone, there's a lot missing. In any partnership, doesn't matter what partnership it is. Once the head goes. So we all thought about finding our own little outlets. And I knew for a certain fact there wasn't room in the business to keep us all going. So I opened up Perpetua House in 1954, and which left a little more headroom in the existing business. Albert came to Wheatley Hill, Freddie took over Thornley, and Tommy then was in work. Tommy was a joiner. Now, as 1954, it must have been 63 when Freddie died, because eh?
It was about 63.
Yes, I think so, yes. But anyway, 1954, I opened Perpetua House, that was it. Opened Perpetua House in 1954. And as time went on, of course, old Freddie died. Albert kept a shop going at Wheatley Hill. And I think it's very little after that. The fact is, I retired in 1981. So that's it all, my dear friends. We've got right up to the present day. And on my retirement, and I went to Darlington, from here to Darlington, and there's one thing I must say, I must give a comment about, is with Perpetua House, that I'm very grateful for two things. Very grateful for two things. Because that business was unique. It was due only to the fact that the customers were unique. And the people of Wheatley Hill who supported me throughout those times, I've got to, from the bottom of my heart, I've got to thank them, because they really were the salt of the earth. Salt of the earth. The other side of the comment was my own wife here, who supported me right through it, right through the whole 27 years I had in Perpetua House. Another thing is, there was a lady in this company that was in my employment for 25 of those years. And to her, I offer her my sincere thanks.
And Margaret.
That's Margaret Hogg. So I don't know whether I've missed anything out. I don't know. Mary and how Joe could probably fill those in for me.
I think he's done well, hasn't he?
Yes.
A final few words. A final few words. This little story tonight has been about one man in particular. Wherever he is, God bless him. And I hope, sincerely, he's in great company with the saints, because that's what he was. He was a saint. I'll not say my father, but I'll say our father. Mary's father, Joe's father, my father. He will always be to us the pinnacle of excellence. He was everything. So good night and God bless you all.
On behalf of the History Club, I'd just like to thank you for a really splendid talk, and I'm sure everyone here appreciates it. And I don't know how you did it. You know, it's it's like ice cream. It's good. It's Baldasera. But I'm sure this will stay in our memories. Last meeting we had photography, and I think tonight, getting it from the horse's mouth just edges the bet a bit. You know, this is the real thing. So once again, Mr. Baldasera, thanks very much. On behalf of these people. Right, after that, I'd like to ask Dr. Martin to finish off for us.
Yes, Martin. Absolutely, Aris.
Yeah.
I've got a little Aris story to tell you before we do it.
Yes,
Angela was died in 1950. I was born in 54, so I never met him. But in my practice at Hetney Hall, where I've been for the last 15 years, a lot of people who used to live in Wheatley Inn and Thornley have told me stories. Apparently, my grandfather used to sell these terrible cigarettes during the war. They were Turkish cigarettes called Pashas. One of the patients told me, he said he was sat there in his shop smoking a Pasha. He used to call Grandad the boss. And he used to say, "Who's smoking Pashas in this shop?" And he said, "Well, you sold them to me, boss." He said, "Well, I sell toilet roll as well, but not let your shit in my shop." Apparently, but the Thornley, the cemetery just over the road, Grandad found out that there was some sort of job lot of cemetery lots going. So he bought the lots for the family, but unfortunately they're running out now. There's only one left. My father and Aris had a discussion last year about who was going to get it. And Aris, being the old shopkeeper, said, "Joe, first come, first served." And just as another demonstration of Grandad's kindness, Dad told me this story about when he actually died. Dad was the one who had to clean out his safe, and what he found was a whole load of unredeemed IOUs and a loaded revolver, which he dumped in the river. Well, just to keep you up to date what's been happening with the family so far, I know most about my branch of the family. Dad here, Joe, he became a consultant anaesthetist and is recently retired but still working his own locum. He had 5 children. I'm the eldest, I'm Martin, and I've been a general practitioner in Hetney Hall for the last 15 years. I had a very adventurous life as well. I moved as far away as Shadforth. The next one down the line is Catherine. She's a teacher now at Peterlee. She has a daughter, still working. The next one is Gemma. She's a doctor. She's married to a solicitor and working community medicine. My brother Tony has got a degree in nursing and he's working as a hospital administrator. And my brother Paul, he went and got a degree in theology and philosophy and he's working as a hospital administrator as well. The one person we haven't mentioned is my Auntie Rosalina, who's Dad's sister, and she was a headmistress for a long, long period of time, and currently working in the Vatican. So she's back to Italy. It's been great tonight for myself because I think we've always been so busy. We've never really had time to talk about the family, and I think it's great that Aris can come and share his memories. And my brothers insisted I brought a tape recorder along, so I'm going to play it when I see them next. And thank you very much for your hospitality. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to say a big thank you once again to the Baldasera family, and thanks for sharing your story with us tonight. I'm sure everybody appreciates it, and I'd like to thank also you all for coming tonight and giving us such great support. It's also appreciated, and I'd like to see you all in the future. Getting something like this could be a real task for us, but we'll be doing our best to try and come up with interesting evenings for the village. So I'd like to invite you all now to a refreshing cup of tea or coffee, and we've got some fresh biscuits, so get stuck in. Thanks very much.
Yes. Irene Bates, Mr. Gemma, Mr. Romano. Yeah, Jenny's doing all right. She's at school.